Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this important information session on applying for financial aid with the free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA. My name is Lisa Talbot, and I'm going to be tonight's moderator, and I'm delighted to contribute to this important topic. Our presenter is Maureen Fagen. Maureen comes to you from Massachusetts, and Maureen has worked in the financial aid field for many years and has a passion for helping people navigate through the process of paying for college. So we have a lot of folks in the background tonight helping to answer your very important questions from Sallie Mae. We have Ed Recker, who's joining us from Ohio, Jeff Lackey, who's joining us from, gosh, I even forgot, he's in Idaho.
Yeah.
Thalassa is joining us from California, and Jean is joining us from Kansas. So we are well represented tonight. We're really looking forward to all of your questions. So please keep them coming. We have disabled the chat feature. So we invite you to ask questions in the Q&A feature, which can be found on the right down on the navigation bar. And your questions will be answered individually by our team members, and they'll respond to your questions in the order that they were received. So thank you very much, and we hope for a lot of participation tonight. Maureen and I are going to go off video because the bandwidth sometimes gets busy. We have a lot of people joining us tonight. So here is our agenda. We're going to introduce you to the FAFSA, provide some valuable information, help you successfully complete and submit this form. We also want to let you know what comes next and how to correct mistakes, add schools, and handle changes in your family's financial situation. And finally, we're going to provide you with some helpful resources for completing the FAFSA and finding that free money for college. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our presenter, Maureen Fagen, and I'm going to ask her to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And like Lisa said, I will be going off camera. It helps with the bandwidth. We've done enough of these webinars, so I'm just going to do that. Okay, so let's get started. What is the FAFSA? It is the single most important thing you can do to get money to help pay for college, and it stands for the free application for federal student aid. And like the name indicates, it is free. You do not need to pay anything to file this form. The form will collect student and parent income, assets, and other household information. And I'll go into this in a little more detail on an upcoming slide for sure. The information provided on the FAFSA will then be used to calculate what's called an expected family contribution. And this is really a measure of the family's ability to pay for college. The school uses the expected family contribution to determine what kinds of financial aid, if any, you may be eligible to receive. And then once the FAFSA is filed, you will receive what's termed a student aid report. And this summarizes the information you provided on the FAFSA, and you can use this student aid report to make any corrections if needed. I do want to note that the FAFSA can only be used for students who are U.S. citizens or U.S. permanent residents. If a student is undocumented or coming from a foreign country, please check with your high school guidance counselor or intended college for financial aid information for other state-specific or institutional financial aid forms that are available. And the FAFSA can be found at the URL at the bottom of this screen. It's at studentaid.gov. So again, it's a federal form, and it will be at studentaid.gov. So some key FAFSA tips. The FAFSA first becomes available every year beginning on October 1st. So it's absolutely timely that we're doing this during the month of October. Wow, that was my New York accent coming out. Sorry about that. Sallie Mae provides a link to the FAFSA resources that you can see at the top of the page at salliemae.com FAFSA. So that's another area to go to see FAQs and get some instruction on completing the FAFSA. The FAFSA for next year, for next September, just came out. So if you are a senior in high school, the academic year next year is 23-24. And so you will be using FAFSA information from 2021. It takes a look back so that it enables families to have the time to file a FAFSA, to have the correct information. So that's why they're going a full year back on the tax information. Let's see, the FAFSA, there's financial aid available to nearly every student. So you don't want to assume that you won't be eligible for financial aid because you earn too much. Nearly every student receives some type of aid. The FAFSA must be filed every year a student is in college. And it's really important to note that financial aid deadlines are not the same as college admission deadlines. So you do want to be attentive to that. We're coming up on what's termed early action and early admission, early decision deadlines. So just be aware that that the FAFSA should be completed in concert with them, but you certainly want to check with individual schools on deadlines. So the first thing that you'll need to do to begin the FAFSA is get a federal student aid ID, or also termed an FSA ID. And this really acts as an electronic signature for your federal student aid documents. You get your FSA ID by going to studentaid.gov, as I mentioned earlier, and all you need to do is include your social security number and a mobile phone number or email address. And it just takes a couple of minutes to fill out the form, but it does take between 3 to 5 days for your FSA ID to become active. So you do want to do this sooner rather than later. So if you were attending some type of FAFSA workshop, you certainly want to go out and get that FSA ID. And now, really important, both the student and a parent, if you are a dependent student, will each need to get an FSA ID. That is one of our most commonly asked questions on these webinars. So one FSA ID for the student and one FSA ID for the parent. And it's strongly recommended that you get this FSA ID a couple of days, or requested a couple of days before you're sitting down to actually go through and complete the FAFSA. And so here's a list of information that you should have at the ready when you're completing your FAFSA. You'll need your social security numbers or alien registration number if you aren't a US citizen. You'll need your federal income tax information, W-2s, and other records of money earned. And remember that for the 23-24 FAFSA, you will need your 2021 tax and income information.
Maureen, this is Lisa. I just had a really quick question. This is
Sure.
all really good information. What happens if someone forgets something or asks something that we hadn't anticipated while you're filling out the FAFSA? If you get interrupted while you're completing the FAFSA, can you just
really
talk
great
about that?
question.
Do you have to start all over again if we exit the application?
You do not, Lisa. Thank you for asking that. So the FAFSA can be saved. And so there is a save key, just like most applications that you might go through. So you can save it and come back to it and just relog in, and it saves all the information. And that certainly is not unusual. I've completed the FAFSA a couple of times for my own children, and there's always some reason why I need to pause. So really good question, Lisa.
And then one other question, sorry. A lot of people think they need to be accepted to a college or university before they complete the FAFSA. Is that true? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So you do not need to be accepted to the college to begin the FAFSA application. And the FAFSA application will allow you to put up to 10 intended colleges on the initial FAFSA application. So not a problem at all, because frankly, the October 1st is early, and most students haven't really applied to college before October 1st. So you can go ahead and start putting down intended colleges. And I also want to comment that If you have more than 10 colleges that you're applying to, that's perfectly fine to add those colleges in after you receive your student aid report, which I mentioned on the prior slide.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for asking those questions. Let's see, what other information? You'll need the Social Security numbers, you'll need your federal income tax return and W-2s, but I will note that there is a tool through the FAFSA that you may be able to use. It's called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, which can save you a lot of time. The data will work for most people, but have your tax return handy as well. And what the data retrieval tool does is it just pulls in all of the tax information and saves you from a lot of data entry if it works for you. You'll also need current bank statements and investment records, and also records of untaxed income. You'll need email addresses for you as a parent and as also for a student. The student a driver's license is optional, but helpful to have. And then again, you have your FSA ID and then the list of colleges to receive the FAFSA. Let's see. I think that covers it on that slide. Again, we have some terrific FAQs at salliemae.com, college planning, financial aid FAFSA. That's the URL there. And so this is really important when it comes to the FAFSA. It's a frequently asked question, determining dependency. And it's really important to understand dependency status and which parent or parents will need to provide information on the FAFSA. So these next two slides will cover that information in more detail. FAFSA dependency is not the same thing as being claimed as a dependent on someone's tax return. So really important to note that. So first, let's address whether or not a student is dependent. And a dependent student is one that will be required to submit their parents' information along with theirs on the FAFSA. And I will comment that the majority of undergraduate students are considered dependent. So on the left side, you'll see those exceptions that would be independent. A student is independent if they are married, are pursuing a graduate degree or professional degree, are 24 years or older, have dependents who receive their support, are active duty military or veteran, are an orphan in foster care or a ward of the court since the age of 13, are an emancipated minor in a legal guardianship, or homeless, or risk of homelessness. So you can find more information about dependency status at studentaid.gov. So it's important to understand that as you go through the FAFSA, there are some FAQs as you kind of progress through, which is really, really helpful. But that said, again, most undergraduate students are dependent. And then once you've determined the dependency status, you will then need to determine which parent or parents will need to fill out the information on the FAFSA. And with so many different family scenarios, this can sometimes be complicated. So when will two parents need to complete the information on the FAFSA? Here are the scenarios where that would be. It would be parents who are married to each other and live together, parents who are married to each other but do not live together, parents who are not married but live together, parent and step-parent who are married to each other and live together. Again, another complicated situation sometimes. So there is really great guidance at the FAFSA itself at studentaid.gov. Just to piggyback on that, when the FAFSA information only needs to have one parent, it would be parents who are legally separated or divorced, not remarried, and live separately. In this scenario, the student would put the parent who provides more than 50% of the support for their student. So I want to say that again. When the parents are divorced, the student would put the parent who provides more than 50% of the support for their student. And when I say divorced or separated. And generally, it's the parent that they live with more than 50% of the time, but not always. And then another situation where you would only be providing one parent is a widowed parent or one who was never married and not living with the other legal parent.
Thank Maureen, real quickly, can you address like this dependency status?
Mm-hmm.
Can really sometimes be really complicated. Are there other resources for families and students to guide them?
Yes, there's a really great resource at the studentaid.gov website, and it's called Who's My Parent When I Fill Out My FAFSA Form. So that's through the U.S. Department of Education. It's at studentaid.gov. And what they do, Lisa, is they provide a flow chart. And we've provided a link here at the bottom of the page. So it does have that address, studentaid.gov, Who is My Parent, for more guidance. And it's basically a PDF. So absolutely take a picture of this page if you would like it, because I think that is certainly it can be complicated for sure.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And then after providing the income that we talked about and providing and determining who's the parent that's providing the income information, as well as asset information, let's talk about the assets. And this is really high level. It shows the assets that need to be reported and what assets are excluded from consideration on the FAFSA. So on the left side of your screen, you can see the assets that must be included on the FAFSA. And this would be things like vacation homes, rental investment property and land, stocks, bonds, securities, and other types of financial investments. And then we have the college savings account need to be included. College savings plans like 529s and Coverdell Education Savings Account must be included. So it's asking for questions here, and you should have a list of all your accounts so that you're ready for this information. The assets that are not included on the FAFSA are your primary home. So your principal place of residence is not included on the FAFSA. If you have a family farm, that is not included. If you have a small business with 100 or fewer employees, that is not included. Your retirement plans and pension funds and annuities are not included. Personal possessions like a car, furniture, clothes, they are not included. And life insurance plans do not need to be included either.
So Maureen, there's a lot here for reporting assets. I'm just wondering, just so we can fully understand this, if a family owns their house and they live in it outright and they don't have a mortgage, then they don't have to report on the FAFSA. Is that what you're saying? Is that correct?
That is correct, Lisa. You never have to report your primary home as an asset, even if you don't owe anything on it.
Okay, thank you. And then also you mentioned various savings accounts like retirement and those 529 college. Yeah. Yep. So you also mentioned the various savings accounts like the retirement, stocks, bonds. But what about, like just plain old checking and savings accounts? To students and families, do they need to report that as well on the FAFSA?
Yes, yeah. So we went real high level with the big investment properties, but yeah, frankly, the checking and savings, what you have at the day that you are completing that FAFSA, you need to indicate for your checking and your savings account. Really good question.
Great. Yeah. The other question, sorry, I have a lot here. So
that's fine. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that the student will receive their student aid report in a few days after filing the FAFSA. Can you share kind of the timeline for the rest of the financial aid process?
Yeah. So it takes a few days for the student aid report to be received. It maybe 3 to 5 days. And once you receive the student aid report, then you know that the schools have also received information. So you know that the 10 schools, or it could be less than 10 schools, that you completed, that you indicated on the FAFSA, they received a student aid report as well. And it gives them the ability at the school to begin, if you've applied to the school, to complete a financial aid offer award for you. So that's the first step, is the student aid report goes to the school. And the timeline for a school to put a financial aid offer or package together really varies greatly from school to school. So some schools may need additional documentation. So that's important to know what type of schools that you're applying to. There are some other financial aid forms. The College Board has a profile, for example, and so some schools will also require another financial aid form, but the majority of the schools do not, but it really can vary. Let me just take a look in here, but we definitely encourage you to be vigilant with the schools that you've applied to, and really look at their timelines. And if a lot of time has kind of gone by, you might want to reach out to those individual schools.
Great.
Okay. So yeah, this slide that I've been showing, the student aid report comes out in a couple of days. The college receives your FAFSA data electronically. The college may require additional documentation, and then the school will send out that financial aid offer. When it's early action or early decision, that timeline can be moving into the December timeframe. If it's regular decision, it's usually more in the February, March timeframe. And special circumstances, I definitely want to talk about this, because the information that is provided on the FAFSA can essentially be almost 2 years old. As I mentioned earlier, families right now will be applying for the 23-24 FAFSA for next academic year. But like I mentioned earlier, the FAFSA year, or the tax year rather, is 2021. And so this question comes up all the time: what happens if my circumstances have changed? So what I want to talk about that. So since 2 years has gone by, you can reach out to the school and let them know that your situation has changed. And here are some examples: significant loss or reduction in parent or student's income or assets. There's been a death or serious illness in the family. If there's been a natural disaster affecting parent, student income or assets. If you've had medical or dental expenses not covered by insurance, and maybe financial responsibility for elderly parents. These circumstances, and this is just a short list, can all be considered something that a school might look at a little bit more. So financial aid offices are very aware of what they term special circumstances, and you would need to contact the individual schools to discuss it with them. So they might recalculate your financial aid eligibility based on the information you provide.
Great. So Maureen, you mentioned earlier that students and parents need to complete the FAFSA using the required tax year, but a lot of time can pass from that year to the time the student is actually enrolled. So I'm just wondering, a lot of times, families' financial circumstances change all the time. What happens if, the circumstances financially have changed since that required tax year? Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So basically, you need to provide documentation for whatever special circumstance that you're alluding to. So you would, in the case of income and assets, you would really need to document that and show that to a school and let them know that your situation has changed. And so they do call it like a financial aid appeal, is what you're looking for. And it's something that the financial aid offices are well aware of. So just be aware that they are very, especially with COVID, that happened a lot. So it's something that might be eligible for you if your situation has changed.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Now we've covered a lot on the FAFSA, but we do certainly have a lot of time at the end of this presentation for Q&A. But I want to talk about some of the free resources that we have here at Sallie Mae to help you with both FAFSA and with scholarship search. The first slide here is I want to just tell you that since you're attending this webinar and you're obviously going to be looking for as much money as you can, Sallie Mae does have a scholarship search engine, and we offer, this tool has over 6 million scholarships totaling 30 billion in available funds. And we most often think of scholarships being just for students with good grades or athletes, but there are a lot of scholarships for artists and golfers and twins and first generation students. So you really need to think out of the box when it comes to scholarships. This tool allows you to go in and create your own profile, and then the tool matches you to scholarships that that fit that profile for you. And then you go directly to each scholarship website to actually apply for those scholarships. And this just brings all the scholarships together. It's just like a nice tool to aggregate the scholarships. Sallie Mae also does a monthly sweepstakes of $1,000 scholarship. So please take a look for that. And my future slide will have a QR code, but the URL for Sallie Mae scholarship search is at the bottom of the screen here. And actually, that's our QR code. Lisa, do you have any comments on here as far as the QR code?
Yeah, so we have, here's 2 QR codes. If you want to pull up your phones, the first one is the Sallie Mae free scholarship search tool. And that is just, again, a really good resource that Maureen just alluded to. And also the scholarship giveaway every month. The other thing is we have some really good information. I know we talked about this, I think, in the beginning of the presentation, but another really great QR code to get more information on FAFSA and a lot of just generally frequently asked questions that come up because the form has gotten a lot smaller over the years, but there's still a lot of questions, and there's just a really good step-by-step guide for unique situations that might pertain to you individually for completing the FAFSA. So we'll just give you a minute to load those on your phone. And then just Maureen, while folks are queuing this up on their phones, there was one other question that came in that was early on, and it was really a great one. Maybe we could talk about it now. I'm a twin, and I know there's other folks on the phone, I'm sorry, on the line here that also might have twins that are going to college. So does someone have to complete a separate FAFSA for each school they're considering? And also, do they have to complete one for each child, I guess, if you have a set of twins? So just curious if you can answer that.
You do need to complete one for each child, Lisa. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. All right. And then while we provide this legal language to you, are there any other questions maybe we could ask some of our Sallie Mae folks in the background to help us out? Are there some other questions that are more common?
While that's queuing up, Lisa, one of the questions that we get a lot is, and I don't know, because I'm presenting, sometimes I forget to say a couple of things. The FAFSA needs to be done every year, and I'm not quite sure that I made that very clear. But that is one of our more frequently asked questions is, do I have to file this FAFSA every year? And you do. And the FAFSA, as I mentioned, comes out October 1 of every year. So it's something that you should put in your kind of on your calendar to go ahead and start doing that FAFSA every year.
Great. I do have a question. In a divorced household, does the child have to report both parents' income? Which parents do I use? Can you cover that a little bit more? I know you had
Sure.
spoken to that, but maybe cover it again.
Yeah. So for dependent students, the parent, it's the custodial parent or parent that provides the most financial support when you have a divorced or separated situation. So I will say, though, that some colleges or universities may ask for some supplemental information. So I do want to note that. But on the FAFSA itself, um, the instruction is the parent that provides the most support at that point.
Great. Okay. There's also a lot of folks that are asking if should they even file the FAFSA if they don't think they're going to qualify for financial aid based on their family's income. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I know you covered that earlier, but
Yep. I did go over that in the slide quickly, but I think it definitely is a point to underscore that we really feel every family should file the FAFSA. They've really tried to streamline the process, and every student is eligible for a federal student loan through the FAFSA. So even if you did not feel that you would be eligible for federal grants, every student has the ability to borrow a federal loan. And the way to do that, the first step is to complete the FAFSA. So that's a requirement. So even if you don't feel like you'll get what they term grants and scholarships, you will be able to have a student loan.
great. Okay. Talking a little bit about kind of the FAFSA and the FSA IDs in the beginning, I know you touched on that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, the parent needing one and then the student also needing one and how that all works? If the student already does an FSA ID, does that also, would that connect to the parent?
Yeah, they will connect. And so as you're filling out as a parent, as you're filling out your FSA ID, you are also connecting it, stating who your student is. It's very important that they're both requested ahead of time, but it can be separate. But and I also, as a parent, I would say definitely hold on to your passwords, keep them safe. If you have a folder, a college folder, just put a little sticky note in there with the FSA IDs, because it's something that you will need to use every year to file that FAFSA, and keep that tucked away. The
Great.
FSA ID, by the way, is used for the student loans. So that student will continue to have that FSA ID for their student loans as well.
Great. What about if folks filed their taxes married jointly? Can you talk a little bit? There's a question: does my husband, have to complete the FAFSA? Can you talk a little bit about that and the status of marriage, filed married?
If
Jointly.
you're married and filing jointly, then you're just you're pulling the information from your taxes. And hopefully you could use the data retrieval tool, which will just pull in the tax information. You just give permission for the tool to go out to the IRS and pull that data in. But otherwise, you're using your 1040 to put your joint income on the tax, on the FAFSA.
Great. So only one parent would have to apply. Yeah.
Well, one parent is, yeah, right. One parent
Right.
gets the FSA ID, and so I understand your question now. And but you're providing the income for both parents.
Yep. Great. There's also a question: if you're applying to multiple colleges, do you receive multiple student aid reports?
Nope. Nope, that's a good question. You receive one student aid report. It's everything that you completed on the FAFSA, and it's basically just confirming what you've put in, and you need to review it, make sure that what you put in was accurate. And then that student aid report electronically is sent to each one of the colleges that you indicated on the form.
Okay. Okay, great.
And then they use, just to take it a step further, they use that expected family contribution number that I mentioned earlier, and that is the basis for determining your financial aid award.
Okay. What about, there's a question here, my parents aren't going to help me pay for college. Do I still have to include their income information on the FAFSA?
Yes.
Okay.
If they are considered a dependent student, they do need to include the parental income. So if a student is independent, and I provided some of those reasons for independency, then they wouldn't. But it's not just if you don't think your parents are going to support you, you still need to provide that household income.
Okay, great. Another question, is there a minimum number of colleges you can list on the FAFSA form? Can you maybe go over that again?
There's not a minimum. You need to put at least one school for the FAFSA to be submitted, for it to go through. But you can do up to 10. And then those 10 schools then electronically have that student aid report and the expected family contribution number. If you've swapped out schools and later decide that there are additional schools that you want the information to go to, you can just do that on the student aid report.
Okay, great. Let's see. So there's another question about are pensions and 403Bs considered? What are those? Are they considered when determining federal aid?
The good news is no. So
Okay.
pension funds and any kind of retirement funds, 401ks, they are not considered on the FAFSA.
Okay.
That and the primary home, those are the really important big ones that stand out to me, that are not included on the FAFSA.
Okay. Can a non-citizen fill out the FAFSA? Also, can a non-citizen apply for federal loans?
No, they cannot. They need to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident.
Okay. Okay. And then another question, if a student doesn't qualify for, the federal subsidized loans, can they still take out the full annual amount in an unsubsidized loan for federal loans?
Yeah, so let me explain for everyone what subsidized and unsubsidized loans are. The FAFSA provides eligibility for any student to receive a student loan. And some students, if they have enough need as determined by the FAFSA, will have the interest on their loans that's accruing that can be subsidized by the federal government during the time the student is in school. And so that is for a student that has a need as determined by the FAFSA. And that's really the whole purpose of the FAFSA, is determining financial need. If a student with the income and asset information that's provided on the FAFSA doesn't demonstrate financial need, they are still eligible for a federal student loan. However, the interest that is accruing on that loan will accrue from the point the loan is dispersed, and all during the in-school period, which is not the case with students that are getting a subsidized student loan. But there's limits to the amount that the subsidy will cover. But so that's another commonly asked question about student loans. There's subsidized and unsubsidized. But your takeaway for this presentation today is that if you're interested in federal student loans, you need to fill out the FAFSA, and you may receive a a subsidized loan, or you may receive an unsubsidized loan, and that will you will see that on your financial aid award letter. The colleges will let you know what you are eligible for.
Okay, great. And then one last question that I have tonight. It's regarding step parent information. Does that need to be included, the step parents information on the FAFSA? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so if a custodial parent is remarried, then that step parent information is also required on the FAFSA. And that's why that that particular that web address, that URL, it's it's really helpful. And you know what? Let me go back a few slides just so I can show that again, because I think there it is. Who is my parent? So you could just pop into Google studentaid.gov, who is my parent, and you should be able to come up with this. And it really kind of provides a flow chart, because I think it's one of the more tricky questions on the FAFSA.
Okay, great. Yeah, that always comes up.
Yep.
Great. Those were the questions that I saw coming in. I don't know if any of the Sallie Mae folks out there have anything that's coming up a little bit more with questions, or if you wanted to unmute yourself. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if this came up. I was so busy answering questions that I wasn't listening to the presentation.
Okay.
But one question that came up a couple of times was, how many schools can you put on the FAFSA and how can you add more? Did you discuss that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
But thank
Okay.
you. And I know
Okay.
that we have folks doing the Q&A, and they've been great. Like they're just like typing away. But yeah, 10 schools to start, and then you could just add more. And you don't have to take any out, because, well, you do, you take them out, but you don't have to worry about that, because the schools have already received the information electronically. And what the school will then do is match up your admission application to do a financial aid award. So just to be clear, you won't receive a financial aid award offer if you haven't applied to the institution, okay?
So there seems to be also a lot of questions that really address kind of their individual situation. I know, Maureen, you had mentioned a really great website or a URL that really helps drive home kind of these really unique situations. I don't know if we wanted to look at that slide just so folks could see it again.
The dependency one?
Yeah, a lot of questions about that.
Yeah. So feel free to take a picture of that. There's dependency. Oh, help if needed. Help. Yeah, here's this first slide. I think they've done a good job on the FAFSA, and they're always improving it to, make sure that they're addressing these questions. I also will, just from my own experience, I had to call. I had a little trouble with my FSA ID, believe it or not. It got swapped with my son's social security number, and so it was very confusing, and I couldn't submit the FAFSA. And I called, and they were great. They helped me through it. They saw exactly what was going wrong. And I think it's a common thing.
Great. So there is someone that answers those phone lines, which is great to hear. Yeah. So I think we are at the end of the presentation. I wanted to just thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. Again, we are very, there's a lot of help out there. If you have not taken out your phone, we do have a great scholarship search, and also a lot of help for filling out the FAFSA. So make sure that you are pulling your phones up and getting a screenshot of these. But without further ado, I wanted to thank Maureen and thank everyone from Sallie Mae that's agreed to help this evening with the Q&A. We did have a lot coming in, and a lot of good questions. And we're very happy to be here tonight, and we thank you for your participation. So
Well, good
this
luck
is,
on your college journey. We're really thrilled that you came out with us tonight. Appreciate it.
thank you. This will end the session for this evening.
Great.
Have
Thanks.
a good night.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks, Sydney.